Let's talk about filming a short film entirely in the dark. This is actually something I've been wanting to do for quite a while now, and back in February I finally had the opportunity to put this idea I've been having into action with my short film, Trepidation. You see, back in 2020, when, things were happening, my friend Tristan showed me his old Russian gas mask that he collected as he collected military equipment and other cool relics from days long past. And I immediately had a few ideas. And obviously, given the equipment I had at the time, I could have not made the short film, so I opted to just do a photo shoot. And that photo shoot was a lot of fun. People called me trendy, but I had fun doing it. And that kind of developed into me wanting to write a short film surrounding a character dressed out in military gear and a surplus gas mask. But I didn't really have a, fully fledged storyline for it. And back in December of last year, I had decided that I was going to start making one short film every single month as a way to challenge myself and grow as a filmmaker. And here we are 3 months in, and I have created my third film of the year, Trepidation. So back in December, I wrote out some of my ideas for the films I wanted to make, and this was one of them. I showed it to my friends and they seemed pretty into it, so I decided to write out a script for it. And needless to say, we didn't exactly go with that original script. We kind of modified it a bunch, but it did involve us filming in the dark a ton. And this is something that I've never really done before, but I wanted to do a lot because it would be a challenge. And it's not something that is very easy to do. And today I'm going to give you some tips on not only how to plan out shooting in the dark, but how to actually go out and shoot it, light it, and go back into your editing software and color it, because that is a serious part of getting the whole look. So, where do we start? We start with the location. First of all, you have to have a location that works well in the dark. You could be filming out in the city. You have at least some form of lighting. You have to have either motivated lighting or just lighting in the scene. And for this film, we had the flashlight that the character was holding, and we had the moonlight. So I knew that both of the light sources in the film were very either tiny or distant. So all the lighting I had to do had to be done from afar. And I don't exactly have the budget to go out and buy massive soft boxes and lights and, just kind of set them up and have all the time to get all that done. So literally what I did was I grabbed my Aperture MC light, which I'm actually using over there, and I have another RGB light over there. So I can't really hold them and show you them in this video, but there'll probably be a B-roll shot with them. But this light was extremely helpful. It's pretty bright given its size, and you have a lot of different color temperature options as well as, different RGB modes that you can use as well. So I used that on a monopod and a boom arm, just kind of like extended all the way out, and we would hold it over the character. And to help with lighting, I had my friend Sam Axtell come out and shoot with us. He did a ton of hard work for the film, and it turned out spectacular. We got some amazing shots, and it would not have been possible without him, and it would not have been possible without Josh, who went through the painful process of wearing all the military gear and walking around in the cold with all that on and doing many takes over and over again. He did a phenomenal job acting, and the whole crew was awesome, and I can't forget my friend Tristan, who supplied us with the military gear as well. Anyways, all of that is necessary, but I didn't have a super big crew, but we made it work and we did it well. So just make sure that you have some people to help you with lighting, or you have lighting set up in a stationary manner so that you don't have to worry about it moving throughout the scene. But as long as you have some lighting, you're going to want to just make sure it gets onto your character somehow. If you're going to do moonlight, don't make the lighting too harsh, because that is actually going to look really weird. And I actually screwed up on one shot. I told Sam to get closer to Josh with the boom arm and have it under, as if it were the light from the flashlight bouncing off the ground back onto the character. Technically, that's not very realistic, and the light was too bright, and I didn't tell him to dim it down. And he's kind of like, are you sure about this? I'm like, oh yeah, it'll be fine, I'll just lower it in post. Don't do that. If you're gonna do something like that, do a take with it like that and a take where it's a little bit different. That kind of made that one shot look a little bit off, but other than that, I think that was really the only shot in the film where it just looked weird. So just keep in mind the distance that your lights have to be from your character. And you also have to keep in mind what you're filming on. I hate to say it, but the gear actually kind of does matter when it comes to your camera in this situation. If you don't have access to expensive lights that will light up the scene, you're at least going to want to have a camera that is good in low light, specifically a full frame camera, and in addition to that, you're going to want a very wide aperture lens. So for this film, I actually went out and bought this Canon EF 24mm f1.4L version 2, and I kind of was like, my 17 to 35mm lens was not working for this because it was an f2.8 and it was just too dark. Even though f2.8 is pretty good for most situations, it just was not working for this film. I needed f1.4 because as high as the ISO can go on this R6, there is a point where it becomes too grainy. So what I did was I just cranked the aperture all the way open, f1.4, shot at f1.4. I did a lot of the focusing manually on this lens and my Canon EF 85mm f1.4L with image stabilization. And having those two lenses with wide apertures was a lifesaver because without it, there wouldn't have been as much background separation and the shots would have been way darker. I was able to get most of the shots over a stop overexposed, which is kind of where you want to be for the log profile shooting in, which is C-Log 3. And that leads me to another thing you want to make sure you're doing when you're out shooting. If your camera has a log profile, I know this sounds crazy, but you're going to want to shoot in it, especially if it is a 10-bit log profile. You need that extra data, especially when you're color grading. I don't care if it looks grainy in the camera, we're going to fix it in post, but you need to have log. If you shoot in a baked-in 8-bit image, it's going to crush your shadows, it's going to bake everything in it, you will not be able to undo it in post. Trust me, as tempting as it is just to have a nice clean look on the camera, it's not going to be clean in post when you try to make it look the way you want it to. So just be sure to shoot in log. It's worth it in the end, provided that you have the right tools to work with it. And once you shoot all your shots, it's time to take it into the editing software, which is the next part of this video. So I'm going to be going into DaVinci Resolve Studio 17. I do have the studio version, and that we are going to be using noise reduction, which is a feature of the studio version, as well as a few lens flare elements, which are also part of the studio version. If you don't have the studio version, or if you're using another software, I highly recommend DaVinci Resolve. It is the best software for color grading. There is literally no software that even comes close. I'm sorry. Nothing comes close to DaVinci Resolve. If you're a Premiere Pro user, just make the switch. I'm sorry, but you're missing out on so much. I'm promising you're gonna love it. So get over into DaVinci Resolve, and if you don't have the studio version, you're not gonna be able to denoise the footage unless you have a third-party plugin, and you're probably not gonna be able to do the lens flares within the color tab. You're probably gonna have to get some lens flare elements online, but the lens flares are obviously completely optional. That's just something that I did for my personal taste, and I thought it made the film look a little bit cooler, more anamorphic, even though it wasn't shot in anamorphic. Unfortunately, did not have the budget for that. If anyone wants to donate an anamorphic lens to me, I'd be more than happy to take it. Anyways, let's get over into DaVinci Resolve, and I'm gonna show you how to color grade your night footage. Okay, so we're here in DaVinci Resolve now, and it's time to take a look at two clips that I've taken from the film and put into a timeline here. One is a clip where it's really dark and he's walking through the forest and looking at all these old weird appliances just lying around, and the next shot is a slightly lighter shot but still a really cool shot of a Jeep going down the road, blazing through the forest on that shot. One of my favorite shots from the film, really. It was really cool to capture that. But yeah, so once I open the clip up in the color tab, we'll see that we have a rather dark and dull image. Let's just find a hero frame and park it there. So, okay, we have this. I think that works pretty good as a hero frame. Just kind of looking down. They're right there. Something like that, that looks good. And if you look down here in the waveform, we see that we have everything. It's not completely compressed, and that's the good thing about shooting log. Even though it's going to be very grainy once we convert it from log into Rec 709, you have all this data to work with, and you can expand it out, and it's not like crushed at 0 and you can't move it. So that's why you always want to overexpose a little bit if you can when you're shooting at night with a log profile. And we're gonna start off our node tree by making, let's just make 4 nodes to begin with. And whenever you want to add a new node, you just do Alt S on your keyboard. I'm going to label this one CST, which stands for Color Space Transform. If you know color grading in DaVinci Resolve, this is your best friend when it comes to getting color spaces all correct. So once we have the color space transform on here, I'm going to set my input color space to the Canon Cinema Gamut, and my gamma was Canon Log 3. And I want to make sure, just to confirm, that my output color space is Rec 709 and the output gamma is gamma 2.4. And this is unusable. If you look here, we have a ton of not just noise, but color noise. I think I might have said grain earlier. Grain is a little bit different. People call it the same thing. Technically, the term for this is noise. Grain adds texture, where noise gets rid of detail. And granted, I'm not really needing a ton of detail in these shots, and it's pretty sharp as it is already, but I can't have it like this. So we're going to start off with some noise reduction. I'm going to label the first node as noise reduction, and you always want to do it on your first node, because if you don't, it might mess up some other things. So that's why I always do it on the first node. And this is where you have to have the studio version of DaVinci Resolve, because the free version just does not have noise reduction. But trust me, it's worth it just for this one feature alone, in addition to all the other features you get. Heads up, you will need a pretty good system to do this on. My computer, I'm screen recording right now at the same time as adding noise reduction, so when I play back the footage, it's going to play back pretty slow. It was shot in ProRes, but it still can get pretty taxing on my system. So for the frames, I'm going to set it to 3. If it's really bad, you can go to 5, but honestly, 3 is the best all around to go with for noise reduction, 3 frames, and that's basically going to look through the 3 different frames and find the best information and kind of, use the information from those 3 frames to remove the noise. And I'm going to unlink the Luma and Chroma sliders here, because we have way more Chroma than we do Luma. And if I just do a little bit of that, it's already better. But you do see we are getting some color loss. But the good thing is the grade we're going to go with will kind of add more color into the shadows. And if you do too much, it'll get really blurry. So you just want to keep it nice and toned to where it is, and kind of just hope for the best. I think this shot was shot at ISO 6400, so it was a lot. So we've done some improvement. As you can see, it's going to get kind of weird in areas where it's dark, but it is improving. Thankfully, I don't really want this to be super sharp. I want it to be kind of eerie, but if you are dealing with corporate stuff or stuff where you need to have really sharp footage, you're probably going to have to add some sharpening afterwards. And there is some weird streaking that you might see, because it's taking the motion data from the other frames to kind of blend out the noise. Next, we'll go into the spatial threshold, and I'll input this up a little bit, and that will help get rid of the rest of the chroma noise. Maybe just a little bit of Luma. You always want to go a little bit too far and then pull it back. I think right around here is where it will be good. And as you can see, we have cleaned it up significantly. I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see this on YouTube, but this is before and then after. So technically we do lose a little bit of detail, but what we can do is we can go over into our next node, and we'll just name this base for our basic corrections. And I'm going to go in here and add some mid-tone detail back into the shot. And you don't want to do too much because it looks fake, but maybe just around maybe 10 to 12 mid-tone detail, and that'll just get a little bit more sharpness in there. You could also go to the blur tab and sharpen it that way. That's really bad if you do it too much, but maybe around there. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's good. So that's our basic correction. We've gotten it to look somewhat usable. Now we kind of have a cool clip. But as you see over here in the waveform, everything is starting to clip at black, and you can see that just by looking at the frame. If that's what you want your end result to be, go ahead, by all means do it. But I want to do something a little bit more unique here, and I'm going to do my look design before my color space transform, just because that's my personal preference, and I have a little bit more information to work with before it gets sent into Rec 709. So I'm going to do look design, and this, I'm not using the plugin called Look Design. That's a third-party plugin for DaVinci Resolve. I'm just designing a look for this, so don't get confused with that. But the first thing I want to start off with on the look design is raising up the black point, because it's going to get horribly compressed on YouTube, and it's just not going to look very good. So I'm just going to take this and raise it up a little bit. Find a point that you like, and as you can see, that doesn't look super great, so we need to add a little bit more contrast into there. And I'm going to do it like that. Maybe let's lift this up a little bit more. I want it to kind of fall off just like that. So the way we have it right now is really good. What I'm going to do is add a little bit of contrast in, and we can kind of go back over into our lift gamut gain. I'm going to pull up the gain a little bit to give some more detail, but as you can see, it kind of looks a bit like a log image. So if we go back to the beginning, it kind of is getting us there, but it's a more toned off version. I don't really know exactly how to describe it because I can't really wrap my head around it, but like what the right words to say. But it's that nice filmish look that you'll see in films like The Batman. If you've seen The Batman, they don't have a lot of the shadows hitting black. They have a lifted black point, and you know, it's all stylistic. So for corporates and general videography, you wouldn't do this, but for film, you could. I mean, I'm not going to stop you from doing it anyway, but for most things, you wouldn't do this. However, we like to get a little bit creative here. So we have that done. Let's go into our log wheels again, and I want to add some character to the shadows. I want it to feel like a weird, mysterious, bluish night. So what I'm going to do is go over to my shadow, and I'm going to pull a little bit of greenish blue into it. So I'm just pulling down very slightly on it. You see, I actually subtracted red. I'm going to add a little bit of blue in. That's too much. You see, you have to be, I don't have like a, oh, whoops, I just completely screwed it up. I don't have a very fine-tuned mouse here, but we're starting to get the look I like with that. As you can see, before we did that, the waveform was kind of all one color and kind of mushed together, but if we do that, you see it brings out some more contrast in it. Obviously, you don't always have to grade by the waveform, but that's what I like to do, just in checking to make sure that I'm getting some color variation in here. So then we can do a little bit for the midtones. I think that's good. Honestly, I want to do it a little bit more. That's too much, so I'm going to pull it back. It's hard to do it with just a mouse. Obviously, if you have the, see, I'm way overdoing it here. Obviously, if you have the, there we go, I like it right there where I had it before. Subtracting red, you can do it this way. And adding a little bit of green in, maybe add a little bit of blue. And boom, there we go. That's looking pretty good, pretty snazzy. And I think there's still one more thing that has to be done to make this look a little bit more nice. Let's go back to our hero frame, which is around here. I'm going to add another node on the outside, and I'm going to name it Glow. And longtime viewers of my channel know that I absolutely love the glow effect. Probably my favorite effect to use within DaVinci Resolve. We're going to go down, change the mode to soft light, and boom, that changed a lot. It put the black point way back down, but if we pull the shine threshold back a little bit, and the spread, we now have lifted it a little bit more. We're going to go gain up a little bit, gamma, and I'm just going to go and get a little bit of a bluish color tint to that. And it kind of affected the tint, the color of the shadows. I want to go back to my look design node and just put a little bit more blue into it, not there. So we've kind of made our basic look here. The next step is a creative thing that I like to do, and that is the lens flare. So let's get right into that. As you add another node on the end, we're gonna name it lens flare, and we're gonna go up into the effects library and we're gonna type in lens. And you might be tempted to go and click on the lens flare option, but we're actually not going to be using that. We're going to be using lens reflections. And this is a cool way to get lens flares, but kind of differently. It's the lens flare actual plugin is one that you have to manually put in the shot and track in. This will pretty much do it automatically for you. So what you're going to do is go down to preset and select streaks, and boom, as you can see, we have an anamorphic streak on his light here, except it's kind of dim. I'm going to brighten it up a little bit, and I'm not so fond of the color, so what I'm going to do is just make it a little bit more bluish. We're going to go with something like that. So it has a bit more of an anamorphic quality, and boom, here we go, we have our shot. So let's just play it from beginning to end. It's playing back at like 18 frames per second right now, but you know, it looks pretty cool. I'd say did a good job. Although there is one thing, and you may notice that his light is flickering a ton. For what I did for the actual grade in the film was I added a node between noise reduction and the base, and I named it deflicker. Can't spell for the life of me. I go over to the effects library, type in deflicker, and you would drag and drop this on, but I'm not going to do this here because there's too many things going on this computer right now. But if I wasn't screen recording, I could do it, it would be fine. I usually just have them on there, but then I disable it while I'm editing, and when I render it, I re-enable it, so it just renders and gets rid of the flicker. And it does a really good job for the most part. As long as there's just one source of flickering, it will get rid of the flicker. So let's just go back to the beginning. We had this to start with. We did our color space transform, which made it look like garbage, so we cleaned it up with the noise reduction, and then we just got the clip settled up everywhere where we want it to be, added in some sharpening to counteract the noise reduction, and then we added in a look that would give us our kind of spooky night vibe, and we get that, and then we did our glow, and then we added in our lens flare, and boom, look at that. And no tracking needed for the lens flare either. It's super simple. And now we can go over to our next clip, which is this one of the Jeep speeding through the woods. Now let's just choose a hero frame. I like that one right there. And I'm just going to go and pull over the grade from that. And as you can see, that looks kind of weird. So we're going to go into disable the lens flare. As you can see, it's a little too bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back into the base node. I'm going to go with the HDR palette. I'm going to select the color space as Canon Cinema Gamut and the gamma as Canon Log 3. And this is best if you want to get exposure dialed in. I'm going to lower the exposure like that. And that's looking pretty snazzy. And the lights are looking sleek. And I don't like the color of the lens flare in this shot. I kind of think it should vary from shot to shot depending on the source of the light. So I think it's going to be, you could go with a more, I mean, you can do any color. I think the really deep blue looks good here, or you could match the color of the lights with this orange one, but I'm actually going to go with a blue one, more bluish, like right there. That kind of matches the background a little bit more, just a little bit more realistic, right in there. Boom, but as you can see, it's flaring all across the rest of the frame, and we don't want that. So I'm going to go in and make a power window and just isolate this region here where we want the lens to be flaring. Because realistically, an anamorphic lens would only choose the brightest spots of the image, not the top. And you could do the source, the isolation controls over in here, but you really fine tune, and then the intensity of the flare goes down. So what I'm going to do, I made this power window into a little rectangle, and I'm going to soften it out a little bit, and we can look up and see what I'm making here. It looks like that. And honestly, I don't think we should have to keyframe it at all, but I'm going to go and it's corrector 6, do that, and then I'm going to go add dynamic keyframe, and let's see if I need to keyframe it. I'm going to keyframe it down a little bit there, keyframe it back up. Thankfully the shot is pretty stable. We're going to go there, back a few frames, put it back up. And we're just gonna put it back up a little bit there. And boom, look at that. And throughout the whole shot, it looks awesome. So yeah, and one thing I will do here is I like the yellow, but I think I want to actually change the look design a little bit more. I'm going to turn off that, and I'm going to change that yellow to be more of an orange. So I'm going to go over to the hue versus hue and just do that, and let's see the final shot. It's going to play back pretty slowly. We actually don't need noise reduction on this one, so that'll fix it up a little bit. Let's go back. Boom. Look at that. That is just awesome. Obviously, that I could do more work on that shot. I do more work on a shot-to-shot basis. But you want to find a good look that you can apply to all of your shots and then do a little bit more minor corrections from there. And that's how you color grade in the dark. Now you know how to set your black points, get noise reduction on there, and create a cool, unique look for nighttime footage. I'm gonna hop back on the couch now and we'll finish out the video. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Rocco. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I have a lot more short films coming up every single month and some tutorials along the way. So if you've been enjoying what you're seeing and have found value in it, I would much appreciate it if you could subscribe to my channel. My name is Rocco, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. Josh did a good job.
I got a lollipop.
Do a burner!
I don't know what Tristan is doing, but it's funny. And yeah, like